Please, somebody help my son. The cry tore through the emergency room like a crack of thunder, sharp enough to turn heads, but not sharp enough to stop the clock. The fluorescent lights above seemed colder than usual. The air smelled of disinfectant, coffee, and fear. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. Somewhere else, a phone rang. Life continued moving. But for Emily Parker, the world had just stopped. She burst through the sliding doors, clutching her 8-year-old son against her chest. Ethan's face was pale. His small body felt heavier than it should have. His breathing came in short, strained bursts that made every second feel like a lifetime. Emily's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she rushed toward the front desk. Her blonde hair had come loose from its ponytail. Her hands trembled so badly, she nearly dropped the folder of medical papers she had grabbed on the way out of the apartment. "Please," she gasped. "He can't breathe right. He needs help." The woman behind the desk immediately stood and signaled for assistance. 2 nurses hurried over with a wheelchair, while another reached for a tablet. Everything seemed to happen at once, yet not fast enough. Never fast enough when it was your child. Ethan's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "Mom," he whispered weakly. Emily bent down instantly. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." His small fingers found her sleeve. "Don't leave." The words shattered something inside her. "Never," she promised. "I'll never leave." The nurses rolled Ethan toward the treatment area. One checked his pulse while another attached monitoring equipment. The sounds began immediately. Soft electronic tones. Murmured medical terminology. Quick footsteps. Controlled urgency. Emily followed closely behind until a staff member gently stopped her near the admission station. "Ma'am, we need to process the intake information." Emily nodded frantically. "Anything. Just help him." The employee glanced at the screen. Her expression shifted slightly. Not cruel, not uncaring, just constrained by procedures older than any individual person standing in that room. "Do you have insurance information?" Emily swallowed. "No. Any secondary coverage?" "No," the woman hesitated. "We'll need an emergency payment authorization." Emily stared blankly. The words sounded foreign, meaningless. Somewhere beyond the doors, her son needed doctors. Not paperwork. Not forms. Doctors. "How much?" she asked quietly. The number landed like a weight dropped from a great height. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. She opened her purse. $47 and some loose change. That was everything she had until payday. Everything. Her vision blurred. "I don't have that." The employee looked genuinely sympathetic. "I understand, ma'am." But understanding did not change policy. It did not slow the ticking clock. Through the small window in the treatment room door, Emily caught a glimpse of Ethan lying on a hospital bed. He looked so small beneath the bright lights. So fragile. The same boy who loved science kits. The same boy who spent Saturday mornings drawing rockets and inventing imaginary machines. The same boy who told her last week that one day he wanted to become a doctor because doctors were heroes. Now those heroes stood on the other side of a door she could not seem to open. Emily pressed both hands against the counter. "Please," she whispered. "He's only 8. The room seemed quieter suddenly. Not silent, just different. As if everyone nearby could feel the gravity of the moment but had no way to change it. A nurse hurried past. A security guard glanced over. Someone in the waiting area lowered a newspaper. The monitor tones continued their relentless rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Each one sounded like a countdown. Emily closed her eyes for a second and fought back tears. She could not fall apart. Not now. Not while Ethan was fighting to breathe. Then, from somewhere behind her, another set of footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Slow, measured, unhurried. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone completely unaware that a mother's entire universe was unraveling only a few yards away. 72 hours earlier, there was no emergency room. No monitors. No impossible choices waiting at the end of a hospital hallway. There was only a small apartment on the west side of Columbus, Ohio, where the scent of cinnamon oatmeal drifted from a tiny kitchen and morning sunlight spilled through worn blinds. Ethan Parker sat at the table in a faded blue t-shirt, carefully sketching something in a notebook while his breakfast grew cold. His blonde hair refused to stay flat no matter how hard he tried to smooth it down. Emily smiled as she watched him from the stove. "You are doing it again," she said. Ethan looked up. "Doing what?" "Thinking so hard that you forget to eat." He grinned and pushed the notebook toward her. It is a new design. Emily examined the page. It showed a strange machine covered with buttons, tubes, and arrows. What does it do? She asked. Ethan leaned forward excitedly. It helps doctors find problems faster, so nobody has to wait when they are sick. Emily laughed softly. That sounds pretty important. It is. His expression became serious. People should not have to wait when they need help. The words seemed simple then. Just another observation from a bright 8-year-old boy who always noticed things adults missed. Emily reached over and ruffled his hair. Future doctor? Ethan nodded proudly. Or inventor. Maybe both. Their life was far from easy. The apartment was small. The furniture came from thrift stores and garage sales. The refrigerator hummed loudly enough to wake people at night. Bills sat stacked on the counter more often than Emily liked. But somehow Ethan filled every room with enough energy to make it feel larger than it was. He talked to neighbors, helped elderly residents carry groceries, remembered birthdays nobody else remembered. People smiled when they saw him coming. That afternoon, after school, Ethan stopped by the diner where Emily worked double shifts. The lunch rush had finally slowed. Plates clinked. Coffee poured. Customers chatted quietly in booths. Ethan sat in the corner with a book while Emily refilled drinks. You doing okay over there? She called. Yes, Mom. A few minutes later, an elderly man entered carrying a cane. He struggled to reach the door while balancing a bag. Before Emily could move, Ethan was already there. He held the door open and carried the bag to a table. The man smiled. Thank you, son. Ethan shrugged. No problem. To him, kindness was not something special. It was simply normal. That evening, after her shift ended, Emily and Ethan walked home beneath a sky painted orange and gold. The air was cool. Cars rolled past slowly. Ethan kicked a pebble down the sidewalk. Mom. Yes. When I become a doctor, can I help people who do not have money? Emily looked at him. Why do you ask? Ethan thought for a moment. Because being sick already seems hard enough. Emily felt her throat tighten. Children were supposed to worry about baseball cards and cartoons. Somehow Ethan always worried about people. Yes, she said quietly. I think that would make you a very good doctor. Ethan smiled and looked toward the fading sunset. Neither of them knew that only 3 days later everything would change. Neither of them knew that the same boy who dreamed of helping others would soon become the center of a race against time. And as darkness settled over the city that evening, a faint cough escaped Ethan's lips. It was brief, easy to dismiss, just a tiny sound carried away by the wind. But sometimes the moments that change a life arrive so quietly that nobody notices them at all. The cough came back the next morning. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make Emily glance up from the coffee maker while Ethan sat at the kitchen table, finishing homework before school. You okay? She asked. Ethan nodded. Just a scratchy throat. He flashed the same reassuring smile he always used whenever he thought someone else might worry. Emily wanted to believe him. For most of the day, she did. Children caught colds. Children got tired. Life moved on. But by that evening, something felt different. Ethan barely touched his dinner. The boy who normally talked nonstop about science projects and inventions seemed quieter, slower. He pushed peas around his plate and leaned his head against his hand. Mom, I think I am just tired. Emily reached across the table and touched his forehead. He felt warm, not alarming, just enough to plant a seed of concern. The next day, she scheduled an appointment at a neighborhood clinic. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and old magazines. A television mounted on the wall played a daytime game show nobody seemed to watch. Ethan sat beside her holding his notebook. Every few minutes, he scribbled ideas for one of his imaginary inventions. Even then, he was thinking about helping people. The doctor examined him carefully and ordered additional tests. Emily noticed the change immediately. It was subtle, a pause that lasted half a second too long, a thoughtful expression. The kind medical professionals wear when they are trying not to create panic before they have answers. We would like to monitor a few things, the doctor explained. It may be nothing serious, but if his symptoms worsen, do not wait. Bring him in immediately. Emily thanked him and drove home with a knot growing in her stomach. That night, rain tapped softly against the apartment windows. Ethan sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching an old science documentary. Halfway through the program, he leaned against her shoulder. Mom. Yes. Do you think doctors ever get scared? The question surprised her. Sometimes. Even the really good ones. Emily smiled gently. Especially the really good ones. The best people understand how important things are. Ethan thought about that for a moment. Then I guess being brave does not mean you are never scared. Emily kissed the top of his head. Exactly. Around 2 in the morning, she woke to an unusual sound. At first she thought it was the storm outside. Then she realized it was coming from Ethan's room. She rushed down the hallway. Moonlight spilled through the curtains. Ethan sat upright in bed, breathing harder than normal. His face looked pale. His eyes searched for hers immediately. Mom. The fear in his voice erased any remaining doubt. Emily sat beside him and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. I am here. She listened carefully, counted each breath, watched his chest rise and fall. Every instinct told her something was wrong. Morning could not come fast enough. As dawn broke over Columbus, the city began another ordinary day. Cars filled the roads. Coffee shops opened their doors. People hurried toward work believing tomorrow was guaranteed. But inside a small apartment on the west side of town, Emily Parker stood frozen beside her son as his condition worsened by the hour. The clock on the microwave read 8:17. By 8:32, she had gathered every medical document she could find. By 8:41, she was helping Ethan into the car. By 8:52, she was praying at every red light. And before the morning was over, the race that would change both of their lives had already begun. The city outside blurred as Emily drove through the early morning traffic, her hands gripping the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline. The dashboard clock read 9:03 a.m., each passing minute stretching longer than the last. Ethan's small body was strapped into the car seat, his head leaning against the side, eyes half closed but flickering with discomfort. Every honk, every engine rev, every siren echoed louder than normal in Emily's mind. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but fear pressed down like a heavy weight. The hospital grew nearer with every block, its tall glass and steel exterior rising over the smaller buildings like a beacon of both hope and cold bureaucracy. The parking lot was already half full with cars bearing license plates from other states, families with their own struggles, nurses rushing to their shifts, and the constant hum of urgent life inside. Emily parked hastily and ran, carrying Ethan as carefully as she could. The automatic doors whooshed open, and the sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with coffee and the faint hint of flowers from a nearby lobby arrangement. Her sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as she navigated through a sea of busy hospital staff. Nurses and receptionists moved with a purpose she envied, each step measured and precise. Emily approached the admissions desk, her voice shaking. Please, my son. He cannot breathe properly. We need help immediately. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition of urgency, and she gestured for a wheelchair. 2 nurses appeared as if summoned, their movements fluid and confident. They took Ethan carefully, lifting him and checking his vital signs while Emily followed close behind. The beeping of the monitors filled the small corridor with an uneasy rhythm. Emily's heart mirrored the pace, each thump a drum of worry and anticipation. The treatment area was well lit, crisp white walls reflecting fluorescent light, everything spotless yet cold, clinical, distant from the warmth she needed. A doctor stepped forward, his expression focused yet gentle. We will take him immediately. Can you tell me exactly what happened this morning? Emily explained every detail, the cough, the struggle, the tests, the worsening symptoms, and the doctor nodded, listening attentively, not with judgment, but with clear comprehension of the stakes. Within moments, a nurse guided them through a side hallway where specialized equipment awaited. Emily's eyes scanned the room. Machines with screens displayed vital signs, oxygen levels, and heart rate, blinking rhythmically. Each screen, each light, each beep carried the weight of potential outcomes. Ethan's small hand reached for hers instinctively, gripping tightly, as if her presence alone could make the numbers better. Emily whispered words of reassurance, careful and measured, trying to keep her own voice steady despite the panic clawing inside. The doctor conferred quietly with another staff member, discussing steps with urgency but calm precision. Emily took a moment to observe, noticing the efficiency, the coordination, the calm control of individuals who did not know them personally, yet treated Ethan like he mattered more than anything else in the world. She adjusted Ethan's blanket around his shoulders and brushed a lock of blonde hair from his forehead, holding him gently while every second felt like an hour. Outside, the morning sun rose higher, illuminating the city streets. Yet inside the hospital corridor, time seemed suspended, every heartbeat a reminder that every decision, every action could make the difference. Emily breathed slowly, trying to focus, to center both herself and Ethan, trusting that the people around them, trained and vigilant, were ready to act, to save, to respond, while silently praying that her son's small body would hold on long enough to reach the help he needed. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors, casting elongated shadows that stretched toward the doorway, marking the path from fear toward hope, from uncertainty to the promise of care, and Emily's hands remained firmly on Ethan as they moved steadily toward the room where the first critical steps would begin. The hallway outside the treatment area felt strangely quiet compared to the chaos inside Emily's heart. The nurses moved quickly from room to room, their shoes tapping softly against the polished floor. Doctors reviewed charts. Phones rang. Elevators opened and closed. Everything around her continued with practiced precision, yet all she could focus on was the door separating her from her son. Every few minutes, someone entered the room. Every few minutes, someone left. But nobody stayed long enough to give her the answer she desperately wanted. Emily sat in a chair near the wall, clutching Ethan's notebook against her chest. She had grabbed it from the car without thinking. Now she ran her fingers across the cover as though it carried a piece of him. Inside were pages filled with inventions, sketches, and handwritten notes. Little ideas from a little boy who believed every problem in the world could be solved if people cared enough to try. A nurse approached with a kind smile. "The doctor is reviewing additional test results." Emily stood immediately. "Is he okay?" The nurse hesitated. Not because she wanted to hide anything. Because she wanted to choose her words carefully. "They are doing everything they can." It was not the answer Emily wanted. It was the answer she received. She thanked the nurse anyway. Then she sat back down and stared at the floor. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The clock above the reception desk seemed determined to move slower than any clock in history. Nearby, families waited with their own fears. A man paced beside a vending machine. An elderly woman quietly prayed with folded hands. A teenager scrolled through his phone while glancing repeatedly toward a treatment room. Everyone was waiting for something. Everyone was hoping for good news. Then another figure entered the corridor. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about him. He appeared to be in his early 60s. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a simple navy overcoat instead of the expensive suits usually associated with hospital executives. No security team surrounded him. No assistants followed him. He carried a tablet under one arm and walked at an unhurried pace, occasionally nodding to employees who greeted him respectfully. Emily barely noticed him. Her attention remained fixed on Ethan's room. But the man noticed her immediately. Not because she was making a scene. Not because she demanded attention. Quite the opposite. There was something about the way she sat there, exhausted and frightened yet refusing to leave her post, that drew his attention. He slowed slightly as he passed. His eyes drifted toward the notebook in her hands. A colorful sketch peeked out from between the pages. Rockets, medical devices, childlike dreams sketched in blue ink. The man continued walking, then stopped. Something about the drawing seemed familiar. He glanced back once more before disappearing around the corner. Minutes later, a doctor emerged from Ethan's room. Emily was on her feet before he could say a word. "How is he?" The physician removed his glasses and exhaled carefully. "We have identified a serious complication. We need to move quickly." Emily felt her stomach drop. "Can you help him?" "Yes," the doctor said honestly. "But time matters." The words hung in the air like storm clouds. Time matters. Not money. Not paperwork. Not policies. Time. Emily looked through the small window into Ethan's room. He seemed so tiny beneath the bright lights. Machines monitored every breath, every heartbeat, every fragile moment. She pressed a trembling hand against the glass. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered. Unseen by her, at the far end of the hallway, the silver-haired man had stopped again. He watched the scene quietly, and for the first time that morning, concern appeared in his eyes. Not professional concern, personal concern. The kind that comes from recognizing that someone's entire world is hanging by a thread. The silver-haired man moved with deliberate calm as he approached the cluster of medical staff surrounding Ethan's bed. Emily had barely noticed him until he stood beside her, his presence commanding attention without a word. He did not push past anyone or demand authority. Instead, he observed, scanning monitors and equipment with the practiced eye of someone who understood the urgency and precision required in a hospital setting. A nurse approached him, murmuring updates about Ethan's vitals and the recent test results. He listened intently, nodding, absorbing every detail, every number, every fluctuation on the screen. Then he turned slightly, his gaze landing on Emily. Her hand was still pressed against the glass partition, her knuckles white, her posture tense with worry that radiated outward in waves. He did not speak immediately. He simply held her gaze, conveying without words a sense that he understood the magnitude of the moment. His presence alone seemed to offer a thread of stability amidst the storm of Emily's panic. The doctor, noticing him now, paused mid-sentence and offered a brief nod of acknowledgement before continuing with the explanation of procedures. The man did not interrupt, but his attentive posture seemed to accelerate the staff's movements, sharpening their focus, ensuring that nothing would be delayed or overlooked. Emily's eyes followed every motion, but she could not quite place the man. Something about his expression was familiar, a quiet authority, a warmth hidden behind a reserved demeanor. Ethan's small hand twitched, seeking comfort. Emily leaned closer, whispering softly, "We are right here, sweetheart. Help is coming." The man stepped even closer, glancing down at Ethan's monitor and then at the files Emily had clutched, noticing the scattered sketches and notes that revealed Ethan's sharp mind and caring heart. For a fleeting moment, recognition flickered in his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned to the team and issued concise, clear instructions that left no room for delay. Each word carried weight, a precise combination of authority and care. The staff responded immediately, moving with renewed coordination and efficiency. Emily could not help but notice the difference. The tension in the air seemed to shift slightly. Hope, fragile yet undeniable, threaded itself through the space as machines were checked, instruments prepared, and a plan solidified to stabilize her son. She glanced once more at the man, a question on her lips. He caught her look and gave a slight, reassuring nod. A simple gesture that somehow conveyed more than words ever could, that Ethan's life mattered, and that they would do everything possible to protect it. The minutes stretched, measured and purposeful, each one filled with anticipation, determination, and a deepening sense of connection between the stranger's quiet vigilance and the mother's desperate hope. Emily felt her pulse slow marginally, a small tether of calm forming as she realized that for the first time since arriving, they were not alone in this fight. Every movement of the staff was now synchronized, every decision deliberate, every breath drawn with intent. Outside the window, sunlight began to filter through the blinds, catching on the polished floors and glinting off instruments, a subtle promise that the day might yet bring resolution. The man remained close, observing, supporting silently, allowing Emily a moment to anchor herself while the team executed their roles with precision and care. And in that silent alignment, amidst the beeps of monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses, Emily felt the first glimmer of faith that Ethan could hold on, that the morning would bring not just another day, but the chance for healing, for breath, for life. Emily finally found the courage to speak. "Who are you?" Her voice was soft, exhausted from hours of fear and uncertainty. The silver-haired man looked toward Ethan's room before answering. "My name is William Carter." The name meant nothing to her at first. Then she noticed the reaction around them. A nurse passing through the hallway straightened immediately. A department director who had been reviewing paperwork paused mid-step. Even the physician coordinating Ethan's care offered a respectful nod. Recognition spread through Emily's expression. She had heard that name before. Everyone in Columbus had. William Carter was the founder of the Carter Health Network, one of the largest private hospital systems in the country. The man, standing beside her, did not just own this hospital. He had built it. Yet there was no arrogance in his posture, no desire to impress anyone. He looked back through the glass toward Ethan with an expression that seemed unusually personal. "Your son," Williams said quietly. "His name is Ethan Parker, correct?" Emily nodded. "Yes." William was silent for a moment. Then he asked a question that caught her completely off guard. About a year ago, did Ethan spend time at Riverside Park? Emily blinked. We used to go there almost every weekend. Something changed in William's eyes. Not surprise. Confirmation. As though a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. The busy hospital corridor slowly faded from his attention as a memory resurfaced. It had happened 11 months earlier on a warm Saturday afternoon. William's mother, Eleanor Carter, had insisted on taking a walk through the park despite her age. She valued independence more than comfort. Somewhere near a fountain, she had become dizzy and disoriented. Not dangerously injured, not in immediate peril, but frightened and alone. Dozens of people had passed by. Most never noticed. Some noticed and kept walking. One child had stopped. A small blonde boy carrying a sketchbook. Ethan. He had sat beside her. Asked if she was okay. Offered her a bottle of water from his backpack. Then stayed with her until help arrived. He had spoken to her the entire time, so she would not feel alone. When emergency responders reached the scene, they assumed he was her grandson. Eleanor had never forgotten him. Neither had William after hearing the story later that evening. She talked about him for weeks, William said softly. Emily stared at him. Ethan never mentioned any of this. William smiled faintly. That does not surprise me. He glanced at the notebook still resting in Emily's hands. The people who do the most good rarely talk about it afterward. Emily felt tears forming again. Not from fear this time. From the overwhelming realization that her son had left an impression on someone he had never expected to see again. Inside the treatment room, Ethan shifted slightly. The monitor beside him continued its steady rhythm. William watched quietly before turning toward the medical team. Make sure every resource needed is available immediately. Nobody questioned the instruction. Nobody hesitated. Yet his next words were not directed at the staff. They were directed at Emily. I cannot promise outcomes, he said honestly. No responsible person can. But I can promise this. He looked directly at her. Your son will receive every chance we can possibly give him. Emily lowered her head as tears finally slipped down her cheeks. For the first time that day, she did not feel invisible. For the first time since Ethan became sick, she felt someone else carrying part of the weight. And as sunlight continued pouring through the hospital windows, illuminating the corridor in soft gold, neither Emily nor William realized that the kindness of a little boy from nearly a year ago was about to change far more than one life. The next hour became a race against something nobody could see and everyone could feel. The hospital seemed to move faster without becoming chaotic, as though hundreds of people had silently aligned behind a single purpose. Inside the treatment area, specialists reviewed scans, compared test results, and discussed options with ComEmergency. Outside, Emily remained near the glass, unwilling to step more than a few feet away from Ethan. Every time a nurse entered the room, her eyes followed. Every time a doctor emerged, her heart skipped. William Carter stayed nearby, not because anyone expected him to, but because leaving felt impossible. He had attended board meetings worth millions of dollars. He had negotiated acquisitions and opened hospitals across multiple states. Yet none of those responsibilities seemed as important as the small boy lying in that room. Around noon, the lead physician approached with an update. His expression was serious but focused. We have a treatment plan, he said. The next few hours are critical, but we are seeing reasons to remain hopeful. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the words. Hope. It was not certainty. It was not a guarantee. But after a morning filled with fear, it felt like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Through the window, she could see Ethan resting quietly while medical equipment monitored his progress. The steady rhythm of the machines had become strangely comforting. Not because they erased danger, but because they meant people were fighting for him every second. William stood beside her and noticed the notebook still tucked beneath her arm. May I see it? He asked gently. Emily handed it over. He turned the pages slowly. Sketch after sketch filled the notebook. Some showed futuristic medical devices. Others displayed hospitals with smiling patients and doctors. One drawing caught his attention. It showed a large building with the words, "Everybody gets help" written across the top, in uneven childlike handwriting. William stared at the page longer than the others. He drew this? Emily nodded. A few months ago. William smiled sadly. He has a better vision for healthcare than many adults. Nearby, a nurse overheard the comment and smiled. The atmosphere in the hallway felt different now. Less fearful, more united. Staff members who had never met Ethan asked for updates. A respiratory therapist stopped by simply to say she was rooting for him. Even people with no direct involvement seemed invested in the outcome. Kindness has a way of spreading quietly. Sometimes one act inspires another, and another after that. As afternoon light streamed through the hospital windows, the first meaningful signs of improvement began to appear. Small changes, tiny victories. Numbers on monitors moved in the right direction. Doctors exchanged cautious nods. Nurses smiled more often. Nobody celebrated yet. The journey was not over. But for the first time all day, the future no longer felt hidden behind a wall of uncertainty. Emily pressed a hand against the glass and whispered softly, "Keep fighting, sweetheart." Inside the room, Ethan stirred slightly. His eyes opened for only a moment, but it was enough. He looked toward the doorway and managed the faintest smile before drifting back to sleep. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. William looked away briefly, giving her the privacy of that moment. Some victories arrive with applause. Others arrive with a small smile from an 8-year-old boy who refuses to give up. And as the afternoon continued, everyone in that hospital understood something important. They were no longer waiting for a miracle to begin. They were watching one unfold, one careful step at a time. By late afternoon, the rhythm of the hospital began to feel more like a heartbeat than a countdown. Emily remained near the glass partition, her hand lightly resting on it, as though her presence alone could lend strength to Ethan's small body. The monitors now showed encouraging trends. Numbers that had once caused her stomach to twist were moving in the right direction, each one a quiet victory. William Carter stayed nearby, observing silently, occasionally offering brief, measured instructions to staff members, his attention never wavering from the boy. Emily's mind replayed the memory William had shared, the afternoon in the park when Ethan had comforted his grandmother. That simple, selfless act had remained with William, shaping the way he now approached this critical moment. The parallels were impossible to ignore, and Emily felt a profound connection not only to the boy's bravery, but to the ripple effects of kindness that stretched across months and miles. Nurses moved swiftly, preparing for each step of treatment with precise coordination. Physicians conferred in low, urgent voices, their decisions deliberate and informed. The sterile light reflected off polished surfaces, creating long shadows that stretched across the floor and walls, but the air inside seemed warmer, charged with hope and determination. Emily whispered softly to Ethan, who stirred and blinked at the sound of her voice, a small smile breaking across his face before he drifted back into rest. William glanced at her, and for the first time she felt the weight of her fear lifted slightly. It was not gone, but it was shared now, carried with care by someone whose authority came not from ego, but from purpose and understanding. Around them, the hospital staff continued with quiet diligence, aware of the urgency, but motivated by the same invisible thread connecting them all to the outcome. Patients, visitors, and staff alike seemed momentarily touched by the gravity of a single family's struggle, understanding that even in the most organized institutions, human connection could be the most powerful force. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating Ethan's face in golden light as he rested, small breaths steadying, rhythmical. Emily pressed a hand to her heart and exhaled, feeling an emotional release she had not allowed herself since that morning. She glanced at William, noticing the subtle expression of relief on his face. No words were exchanged, yet understanding passed between them. The boy they watched was a living reminder that acts of courage and compassion, no matter how small or unseen, could return in extraordinary ways. By evening, Ethan's condition had stabilized further, and the staff allowed Emily to sit closer, brushing a stray lock of blonde hair from his forehead and adjusting his blanket with careful tenderness. William stepped back slightly, giving mother and son their moment while maintaining a quiet vigil, ensuring every resource remained available. In that shared silence, Emily understood the depth of trust and care surrounding them, a combination of human skill and humanity that had bridged fear, uncertainty, and hope. The hospital, vast and imposing just hours before, had become a space where empathy, courage, and attentive action converged, and for the first time all day, Emily allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a normal tomorrow. Outside, the city lights began to glow as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yet inside, warmth, patience, and resilience held firm. Ethan slept peacefully, a subtle rise and fall of his chest marking the triumph of a day that had begun in panic and fear, now ending with life, hope, and the quiet assurance that sometimes the smallest kindnesses reverberate far beyond their first moment, shaping outcomes and hearts alike.